Great. Well, first of all, what you said about your questions and coming here and forgetting them, I want to share a story with you about this because, yes, we come each night, we sit, we do questions, we do answers. It's wonderful. It's a special time. But it's also very important to allow, when you're here in this place, to allow for the possibility of actually the questions answering themselves. And so I wanted to just share a personal story with you, which was when I first came here. Puja Swamiji used to give darshan for a very specific, it was a 1 hour slot that he would give darshan. And literally at that hour, he would stand up and go. And if you didn't have a chance to see him, you could come back at the next darshan time. And it was for anybody with anything. So it wasn't even always spiritual questions. A lot of times it was people who had come in from abroad, from other places to visit. And, maybe it was even a personal aspect of life, needing guidance on something happening in a personal life, anything. So I used to go and I would sit. And inevitably, the hour ran out before the people ran out, which was fine because I was in this just incredible state of ecstatic intoxication and couldn't have completed a coherent sentence if I had tried. And so it was perfect. I just wanted to sit in his presence. But after a few days, I hear, and I would close my eyes and just meditate. And after a few days, I hear him say, yes. And I open my eyes, and he's sitting, and the room is empty. Everybody's done. And I think, oh, my God, okay. And I was an academic. And I was not just an academic, but I was a front row question asker academic. I mean, I was the person in your 250-person lecture hall at 8 a.m. sitting in the front row who actually had questions. And I couldn't think of anything. I mean, my brain was just... And when I got back to my room later, I mean, there's more to the story that I'm not going to go into now for the shortage of time, but later when I got back into my room, I realized I need to have questions. I'm like, I looked like just a bubbling idiot. I mean, he doesn't even know me, and look, I couldn't even say anything. And no questions? I mean, who has no questions, right? So I sat in my room and I thought of questions. And I went back, and again, the time ran out before the people ran out. But a few days later, again, there we were. And I'm looking at him and I realize I can't remember any of my questions. And I had thought of them again every time before I went in. I mean, it wasn't like I'd thought about it days before and not again. Every time before I went in, I was prepared. I know my questions. And he looked at me, and I could not remember a question. So, again, mortified, I then decided, well, I'm going to write them down. And we didn't have, smartphones at the time. I'm going to write them down. And I made a list. And the next time it happened, I thought, well, thank God, I've got my list. And I used to have just a little purse, one of those just little woven, bags. They sell them in the market, a little square one. I didn't have much that I carried around. I had a room key, and that was pretty much it. So I didn't even need a purse, but I carried it. And in my purse, well, it's important to know that it wasn't like a bag that most of us carry now that's got 1,000 things in it. I mean, there was nothing in my bag except my room key and maybe chapstick and my list, because immediately after I wrote it, I put it in my bag. And I opened my bag, and there's no list. And there was no point even like turning it upside down. There was nothing in the bag. There was my room key. And There weren't any secret pockets. There were no secret component. There was nothing. Wasn't there. And I said to him, I must have dropped it somewhere along the way. Do you have 2 minutes? Can I come right back? And he smiled. He said, sure. So I literally run back to my room. I'm looking on the path. It's not there. I run back to my room, scouring my room. It's nowhere. And I literally start throwing sheets off my bed. I took my pillow out of my pillowcase as though somehow my list would have fallen into my pillowcase. Everything. And there's no list. And I finally had to just come back. I'm so embarrassed. And said to him, and he looked at me and he said, yes. And it was just this, yes. Like, there are no questions. Yes. There had been questions. It wasn't, you crazy woman. You invented the fact that you wrote a list. He knew. Yes, there had been questions. And yes, now there were no questions. And that for me to drive myself crazy, trying to go back to the moment when there were questions, was not being true to the present moment in which there were no questions. And it was such a powerful, powerful teaching. So I wanted to just share that with you. But on the level of attachment and non-attachment in our relationships, well, this is true regardless of whether, as you say, it's a householder or whether you simply move through the world. We have expectations. We have expectations of how people are going to treat us, and whether they happen to be our spouses or children or in-laws, or they happen to be our employers or employees, or they happen to be our elected officials, or the whole spectrum. We have expectations of how people are going to behave, how they're going to act, what they're going to do, how the universe is going to act. We have expectations of justice. We have expectations that when I plan a picnic in the summertime, in the dry season, it's not going to rain. And we're attached to that, meaning when our expectation is not fulfilled, we're upset. Varying degrees of upset depending on what the expectation was. So I have an expectation that when I wake up tomorrow morning, my loved ones are still going to be alive. I have an attachment to that expectation being fulfilled. If I wake up tomorrow morning and discover my loved ones are not alive, I'm going to be more upset than if it rained on my picnic. But they're all expectations that we have of the universe. And whether you're looking at getting along with a spouse or a child or an in-law, or you're looking at getting along with the universe, the lesson is really always the same, which is you have no control over anything other than yourself. We try to exert more control, to manipulate more control in our close relationships, but you don't actually have more control. And so the more that I hook my peace, my well-being in another person's actions or the weather's actions or nature's actions, earthquakes, fires, illnesses. I mean, that's not an action. It's not that somebody waved a magic wand and said, there shall be a fire. Just it happened. But the more that I hook my peace in the actions of others, the more difficult my life is going to be. Yeah, there'll be moments that are wonderful. There'll be moments when everything goes exactly according to how I want it to be, and I'm high. But then there's going to be moments when it doesn't. And so this is where it's so important for my own well-being, regardless of whether I'm a householder or a sannyasi. It doesn't matter. I still have to have the universe. You still interact in the world. You live in a cave, well, all right, there it's going to be the snakes, and it's going to be the scorpions, and it's going to be the other people in other caves, whoever it's going to be. The villagers you're begging for food. We all have these. And the more that I can unhook my peace from anything outside of myself, the greater chance of peace I have in my life. The greater chance of joy I have in my life. And it's really interesting because we really think, most of us do, that other people are the ones who bring us joy or pain. So, in a good way, God, it's so nice to be with you. You bring me so much joy. Or the flip side, I was so peaceful, and then you came home. Couldn't you have stayed out a little bit longer? The day was going so well. But in either case, really all they're doing is triggering reactions within ourselves. And the reason that we know this is if something is actually impacting us from it. So, the example I always give on this is the air conditioner. The air conditioner is actually giving you cold air. If you stand close to it, you get a lot of cold air. The farther away from the air conditioner you move, the less cold air you get. There's a direct line between amount of cold air on your face and your proximity to the air conditioner. But if somebody makes you happy, and then they get up and they go to the kitchen, you're not less happy. You go to the store to get something, you're not less happy. Similarly, someone steals your peace, all you've got to do is picture them, and your peace is gone. They could be on another continent. And all you've got to do, I can't tell you how many people, come to me individually or in satsang, and the problem is someone who's making them miserable, and it turns out that person is, hundreds of miles away or thousands of miles away, or has passed away. Amazingly, some people actually still have the ability to make you miserable when they're no longer in their bodies. And the reason is because it's within me. It's not like the air conditioner. That love, that peace, and simultaneously that misery is not emanating out of them into me in a way that I have no control over. Love is within me. Joy is within me. Peace is within me. That person triggers my own internal peace production mechanism, joy production mechanism, or that person triggers my patterns that lead to misery. But it's all happening in me. It's all happening in me. And so, and again, we know this also because if you alter your state of consciousness, and this isn't, I'm not recommending this, but just for anybody who ever has, we know it's true. If you alter your state of consciousness chemically, alcohol, drugs, some medicines even, you react differently to the world. You see the world differently, literally. Your vision literally changes. Your reaction to things literally change. So it's just a very, very potent reminder. It's all in me. It's not actually about that person. See, look, I've changed little bit of chemicals in me, and look how differently I react. Again, not a path I'm suggesting, but just a way that gives us even further evidence that it's in me. And so the question becomes, okay, so how can I have my peace production manufacturing unit on? My love production manufacturing unit on, regardless of who's there. How can I uncap the well of joy? Why do I need someone else to say something that triggers a domino reaction in me that pulls off that cap? If it's all happening in me, why can't I do it? And the truth is we can. But it's just a completely different focus. Either I'm looking at you to do it, or I'm looking inward to do it. And the more I look inward, the more I realize, oh yeah, wow, that joy is there. The peace is there. I can access that anytime. Yeah, you're going to do your thing. You're going to say your thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to activate my misery production plant. You've just said something. You've just done something. That's in its own space. Doesn't have to trigger that in me. Those controls are in my hands. And so the more that we can keep remembering that, the last thing that happens with that is we then become energetic transmitters of the joy, of the peace. And so even though it's not about changing other people, that actually ends up becoming a byproduct. Don't go into it for that. Because then rather than focusing on yourself, again, you're still focused on others. Okay, has my love changed you yet? Has my peace changed you yet? How can you still be yelling at me? Look, I'm emanating peace. Can't you feel it? You've got to let it just be a byproduct. But it is a byproduct. Because as you transmit that, it does change the energetic vibrations of the area, There was a period of time in which, in Western science, in India they've always talked about energy, but there was a time in the West where it was all matter. Then, the New Age started coming and people started talking about vibrations, but it was really looked upon as very wishy-washy and New Agey and, by serious people, whether serious scientists or serious spiritual people, because the whole vibration thing just sounded a little bit too wishy-washy. But now, literally, scientifically, what we know is that thoughts, our brain waves, literally emanate frequencies into the atmosphere. And they actually can now be read with brain scan machines that are not hooked up to your brain, that are inches away from your brain. So I'm literally emanating frequency, vibrations, that are being picked up by a machine. Well, if a machine can pick them up, then certainly the energetic beings with whom I'm living can pick them up. And so that's a byproduct of staying grounded in yourself.